I needed a bunch of new table saw inserts for my table saws, and so I decided to make a bunch today out of some old recycled materials. Here's how I did it. In preparation for this project, I've been collecting a few of these polyethylene cartons. This process will work with anything that has a recycling 2 on it. That tells you that it's a high-density polyethylene. The most common form of this is probably going to be milk jugs. The first thing you need to do is to cut up all of the cartons. Now, I've heard a lot of people say that this works best if you cut the pieces really small, but I found that really doesn't matter at all. The size of the pieces just dictates what kind of pattern you're going to have, that's all. The biggest issue are the labels. You can either sand those off or you need to discard them. This is also a great project to do with the kids. Now, like I said before, everyone needs some form of a shop oven. Hypothetically, as long as you're not burning your plastic, it shouldn't create any toxic fumes, but it's still a risk, so you should definitely try and do this out in the shop if you can. One of the biggest problems with working with polyethylene like this is you end up with a lot of voids a lot of the time, so I found the best method is to fold the piece in half after it's melted, and that gets rid of all your voids. And because I'm looking for a uniform thickness, I put these 2 spacers underneath a 3/4 inch sheet of plywood and clamped it down evenly. You have to be really careful here because if you over clamp in the middle of the board, it will put a bow into your piece. You want to avoid that. And if you did all of this right, you should end up with a fairly flat piece of plastic. Now, since I'm making inserts for my table saw, I decided to hot glue one of these old metal inserts onto the plastic, and I started out by cutting it out with the scroll saw. And then I went over to the router with a flush trim bit to finish off the rest of the plastic. I love using hot glue for applications like this because it's not a permanent bond, and the hot glue comes right off the project when you're done with it. Now, it's important to remember that even though these were clamped flat, they're still not perfectly flat, so you're going to have to fine-tune these a little bit. I did this with an orbit sander. However, if you have a drum sander, that would be more ideal. Do not run these through a planer. I did that once, and it was a terrible idea. Once I was done flattening it, I could sand up through the grits all the way to 1000 grit. Now, this first piece ended up slightly too thin, and it ended up slightly below the table saw's surface. And this gave me an opportunity to try something I've never actually done before, which is to use hot glue. This is a way of custom fitting some rubber feet onto the bottom of the insert. You just put it into place, and the hot glue actually holds the piece up a little bit, so you want to push it down with some sort of a flat stick to make sure everything stays nice and level. And then I needed to cut the zero clearance kerf into the table saw inserts. Please be extremely careful with this step. There really isn't a perfectly safe way of doing this. There are ways that are better than others, absolutely. My favorite way of doing this is pushing down with a piece of wood, sort of like this, but you can still get hurt doing this, so please be very careful. Now, since I was making a bunch of these inserts anyway, I decided to make a couple out of this old bucket. The cool thing about this method is these buckets only cost about $5, and it can give you 2 or 3 inserts just with a single bucket. And I ended up with all of these. I absolutely love how these things turned out, and the coolest thing about them is how customizable they are. You can make them out of any color you want, or do like I did and make a combination of colors. You can even do something like this that I did on this cutting board and do a Damascus flip pattern. The possibilities are basically endless. Also, while I was in the process of making these, I used one of these cutoffs to make this little kerf tool. Since I don't like to put a hole in my inserts, I use this instead to lift the inserts out of the table saw. So I'd love to hear what you think about this down in the comments. What kind of design do you think would look cool on a table saw? Are there any Damascus patterns that you really like that you think I should try next? Let me know. And which one of these is your favorite? I'm kind of partial to these orange ones, honestly. I think they're really cool. They're a lot more visible than the multicolored ones. Thank y'all for watching. Catch y'all next time.